Alright, welcome, howdy folks, to the purple set endurance set review for Houses of Morrowind. We're going to start off with the Vardbark experiments, and this is the cutest card in the game. And I'm going to have a really hard time casting this spell and then sacrificing them, betraying them, to turn them into Devaith's experiments or whatever nasty things I want to do with them. I'm just struggling to think of a way to justify that action to myself. I mean, look at that little fella. He's like, "Meh." Anyway, this card has some applications. I struggle to think of a deck that I want to play this in right now, even a deck oriented around Betray, which, Betray in general is kind of a mechanic I'm not super impressed with. I'll just put it like that. It has some applications with Divine Fervor, with 5th Legion Trainer, I just don't want to kill these cute little fellas. So let's move on to something that loves killing. Ald Valat the Assassin. It's a 2 magic, a 1/2 with lethal and rally, and this is one of the most powerful cards in the entire expansion. This card is going to be everywhere. This card goes into several decks that already exist, mid-range Sorcerer and mid-range Warrior, although they are probably more accurately called Aggro Warrior and Aggro Sorcerer, since they are some of the most aggressive decks that this game has, at least, that practically function in this game. This card is also going to be a card in the 3-color Rally deck in Redoran colors. This card is good. It's just all around good. I think you play this card in almost every deck that you can play it in. I think that in most cases, for most decks that run purple, you're going to want to take a look at this card. The Rally effect is useful. It's always trading with something, even if it's just a removal spell, the only exception being 2/2s with Ward, of which there are a number that see quite a bit of play. You're absolutely right about that. But this card is absolutely bonkers. And with lethal, it's not even a bad top deck in the late game. Almalexia's Disciple is a 2 magicka 2/3 with Exalt to heal all friendly creatures. I thought this card was complete trash until I played against a self-harm warrior deck on the test servers where this card was amazing. In that deck, this card is great, potentially. This card is here's the thing, its ability is very, very powerful. To heal all friendly creatures and give you a 2/3 for 4 magicka is very strong. Very, very strong. A lot cheaper than you could probably expect that ability to cost otherwise, attached to that body. There are not a whole lot of situations where that is particularly useful. In those situations, this card is going to be an all-star. This card is pretty good in Arena, not great. It's the fact that you can play it as a 2/3 for 2 when you need to is what bumps this up from just total niche crap to, I say niche crap as a guy who builds decks around niche crap all day, no disrespect intended, to a card that might have some constructed applications in, again, pretty niche decks. Caius, I don't know how to pronounce his name, so I'm going with Caius. Caius's Machinations. Also don't know how to pronounce that word. Because I'm an idiot. Anyway, it has Betray, and give the top 3 creatures your deck +1/+1. This card, I don't know. It's hard to evaluate because it's the first time we've seen a mechanic like this outside of the guy who got nerfed 4 or 5 days after Heroes of Skyrim dropped almost a year ago now. And that card was more powerful than this card. That said, I think this card is strong enough to see constructed play. In certain decks, this is going to be absolutely nuts. You don't have to have 3 creatures in the top 3 cards of your deck. It hits the first 3 creatures in your deck in general, so you're never going to lose value on this thing. You're always going to get the 3 creatures +1/+1 or +2/+2 if you sacrifice a creature when you play it. So you need to build the right kind of deck in order for this card to be particularly useful. I've been disconnected, so I will be right back. Right, so before I was disconnected, as I was saying, Kai's Machinations. That's how we're going to pronounce it. Good enough. Quara Clan Bloodkin is a 1/5 for 2 with Drain. This card, I mean, it's hard to argue with those stats, right? Obviously you rally this creature once, and a 2/6 for Drain is pretty damn good. Even slapping a Steel Scimitar on this card seems pretty powerful. I think this card is good enough to see quite a bit of play. Not every deck that can run it is going to want it, but it's definitely strong. But it requires other cards to function well. So that's the caveat. Trespasser's Bane, set a creature's power to 0 to 1 for 2 magicka. I don't know. Mummify is always better, right? Almost always better. That's really my thought on that. Ancestral Dead. So this obviously plays a role in the Sword deck. It has Skeleton Synergy. And the Risen Dead, it's worth pointing out that it summons have Guard, so they're not just vanilla 1/1s. But yeah, it's a 2/4 for 3 playable stat line with a slay ability, and its stats suggest that it might be able to trade off into a, trade successfully in combat with an opposing early creature. This card's pretty strong. It doesn't belong in every deck that can run it, but it certainly belongs in some decks. Daedric Crescent is a 3 magic item with +2/+2 and Slay +1/+1. I don't think this card's particularly good even in decks that care about Slay. Although it's probably pretty good in Arena, like a lot of cards are. Indral Mastermind's a 3 magic, a 2/1. Summon, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, draw 1 and discard the other. This card's real good. This card's real good in control decks. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this card is the purple Daggerfall Mage. I think this card's auto-include in a lot of decks. The card filtering is super useful, and control decks are going to oftentimes have to run cards that aren't necessary in every matchup. This guy helps with that. Knight of Nisus. This card has a ton of value packed into it. It's a 3 magic, a 2/3 with Rally. That alone might be playable. The fact that it also puts a Colovian Trooper into your hand that's a 2/2 with Guard, just added bonus. This card's real strong. Does the Rally deck want this? Probably. Do other decks want this? Probably. I think you could play this in mid-range Spell Sword, for instance, successfully pretty well. There's a reason this card's an epic. It's good. Bonewalker is another of our new Prophecy cards, all of which are pretty defensively oriented, which I really like. This one costs 4 magic and is 1/2 with Guard, and when you summon it, it gets +1/+1 for each enemy creature in this lane. This card on first rune will sometimes absolutely win you the game. This is Dawnstar. This is Cloudrest Illusionist levels of power when you hit it on a Prophecy. It's not Cloudrest Illusionist levels of power when you play it onto the board naked, although in some circumstances it will be a 5/6, which is really good for 4. Yeah, this card is real strong in any kind of slower, more controlling endurance running deck, and I expect it to see a ton of play. Mournhold Pilgrim is a 4 magic, a 4/4, totally playable stat line on its own. With Regenerate, it's whatever. Regenerate's never really useful, although it can be. I mean, it's just none of the cards that have ever been printed with it really give a shit about it. And it has Exalt 3 +2/+2, so for 7 Magicka, you get a 6/6 with Regenerate. There's already a 7 Magic, a 7/7 with Regenerate, that's a dragon, that sometimes sees play, and when it does see play, you frequently find yourself unable to do anything about it. This card is better than that card, even though when you exalt it, it's worse, just because of the flexibility it offers. The question is then, where the hell do you ever play this card? And I don't honestly have an answer to that. It's a powerful card, and it's appropriately costed for everything it does, but I don't know where you play it, which I think is probably what a lot of people are going to find with this card, that there's just nowhere to put it particularly usefully. Good in Arena, blah blah blah. Redoran Oathman is a 4 magic, a 3/3. If you have a yellow card in play, double its health, and if you have a red card in play, double its power. So if you rally this thing as a 5/5 in your hand, and you play it, and you have both those things in play, you get a 10/10 for 4 magicka. That is obviously awesome, and that's the dream scenario. In the cases when that doesn't happen, and you never rallied into it, and you only trigger one of its things, it's a 3/6 or a 6/3 for 4, which is playable. That is Hive Defender and Hive Warrior, or whatever the guy that nobody plays with that mirrors Hive Defender is. So this is a totally appropriately casted card that sometimes is going to be really, really, really insane. The rest of the time is just going to be okay. And if you find yourself having to play it as a 4 magic, a 3/3, you already lost that game, and it doesn't really matter. In the games that it's not a win more card though, because there are cards where you play this as a 3/6 or as a 6/3, are going to get you back into the game if you're fighting for the board, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it's going to seal the game. It's a strong card. Rising of Bones, 4 magic action, summon a 3/3 Risen Horror with Guard and Betray. This card's a lot better than I thought it was at first. First of all, it looks awesome, and second of all, it is just a lot of value. The kind of deck that wants this is going to be able to sacrifice a 1-drop or a 1/1 token, or a 2/2 for that matter, and place guards where they want them. It's a very strong effect, very strong card, and one of the few Betray cards that I think is really just obviously good. Not an auto-include, but plays a role in certain strategies. Skeleton Champion. This card is the reason we all want to play Skell Sword, the Spell Sword Skeleton Tribal deck. It's a 4 magic, a 4/4 with guard that when you summon it gives other friendly skeletons +1/+1. This card is powerful. This card is good in a very specific deck. The rest of the time, this card is not good at all. But I like that this card exists. I like that it encourages a brand new archetype, and I expect people to be playing that archetype. Baal Isra War Rider is a 5 magic, a 3/6, and I think it's probably the worst rally card. Um, I don't want to play this on turn 5, even if if this card's just been soaking up my rallies the whole game, like I feel like I'm going to lose that game because it has no impact on the board. It's just a big body, and by turn 5, your opponent probably has a way to deal with it. So it's not good. Betty Netch. This card's beautiful and awful. It's a 5 magic, a 0/5. While it's in play, your max magic is increased by 2. The only deck I would consider running this in is a Ring of Imaginary Might deck, and in that deck, I probably have better things to do. I'd probably rather run Portcullis in that deck. The ramp is interesting. You're going to randomly get this sometimes off of your things that summon beasts because Netches are beasts. And, I can imagine situations where you get tremendous value out of this, but nobody plays the 2/2 for 2 that increases your max magic by 1, and this card is probably worse than that in every situation, except for a handful of few, in which case you're going to say, I need to run Betty Netch, and you're going to be happy about it because you're playing Ring of Imaginary Might. Indomitable Ordinator is a 5/5 for 5 with guard. Very reasonable stat line. With Exalt 1, your opponent can't target Indomitable Ordinator with actions. So, I have to disclose that this card has randomly screwed me on the test servers on more than one occasion. It has been the perfect answer to what I was trying to do. Is it good? I think I have to say yes. I think that dropping a 5/5/5 guard creature is totally reasonable, and the additional ability on this is going to win you some games. Sometimes the way you beat a control mage deck, for instance, historically, is to beat them down with Nahagleaf, because you have a couple turns of doing that before your opponent can Manticora it. This guy gives you that opportunity earlier. And frankly, the lower stats are worth the fact that you can get it down a turn earlier than whatever his name is, Nahagleaf. Looks like an orc, by the way, even though he's not. Bloodline Outcast is 7/7 for 7 that says when a creature dies, this card gains drain until end turn. This gets my vote for one of the most powerful arena cards in the set, and card most likely to see play eventually when we get Vampire Tribal Matters type cards. And in the meantime, I don't think it's very good at all. There are going to be some situations where it's good. That's true about most Legends cards because most Legends cards are very well designed, but this is not going to be a constructed staple anytime soon. Mushroom Tower. I've heard this card the worst card in the set. It's a 9 magic support that says your actions have betray. And yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. There are a couple actions that if I could copy, I'd love to. I don't know that the setup cost here is worth it. I'm, you know, there probably is a way to break this card, but you have to run this card in order to break it, and running this card is such a huge cost. I don't think it's very good. Real quick, addendum to my purple review. I forgot to turn on the Soul Sight thing after my computer crashed, or after the game client crashed. So I didn't get a look at the cards that I don't have copies of on the test server. Unday, we're going to go with that. Clan Sorcerer, 4/3, 4/3. At the end of your turn, if 3 more creatures die this turn, put a random blood magic spell into your hand. This card's really strong. It doesn't go, it's not the purple, Daggerfall Mage. It doesn't go in every deck that can run it. But in some decks, it's going to be great. In some decks, I think in the same decks where it's great, you also can play it on turn 3 and trade with stuff and be totally happy with it. Because I think this is ultimately a control or slower mid-range deck kind of card. And that for that deck, the stat line's totally fine. Blood magic spells are super exciting. I love casting them. I won the very first Elder Scrolls Championship Series on a 25% chance to pull drain life. Because that's how I roll. And, yeah, I like this card a lot. We've all talked about it quite a bit because it's been revealed for a couple weeks now, but it's a strong card. Kaias Casares is a 4 magic, a 3/4. With summon, look at two of your opponent's cards, guess which one is in their hand. If you're right, give all creatures in your hand +1/+1. This is a hard card to evaluate. This card's pretty good in everything. If you're good at guessing, it's pretty good. If you're not, it's still a 3/4 for 4, and it's unique legendary, and you only have a 1 in 50 or 1 in 75% chance, 1 in 25 chance of drawing it in the first place. Sorry, I've been recording these all day. My brain is falling to mush. Uh, I like this card. I don't think it's great. I think it's pretty good. I think that by the time you drop it on turn 4, you kind of got to wonder how many creatures you're going to have left in your hand. If it's 2, if it's 3, okay, the investment's probably worth it. If it's 4, awesome, although how are you still in the game? It's one of those kinds of things. A little awkward of a card, but certainly interesting. Certainly a good looking dude. Uh, Odurniran Necromancer. Yeah. This is a rally card, like a lot of cards in this set. 6 magic, a 3/3. Summon a creature from your discard pile with less power than the Necromancer. Cool. If this guy's a 5/5, it's a lot better. So rally this guy up and then bring back your best creature in your discard pile. Is this card better than the other Necromancer, the Blackworm Necromancer? Sometimes. I would say maybe half the time. I don't know. Honestly, I don't think most rally decks want this. I think that if there is a slower 2-color rally incorporating deck, cool. This card could play a role in it. It's a very, very, very powerful effect, and one that I'm glad that they're being kind of conservative with costing. And I think this card is going to see play. It's not one that I would rush out and craft right away because I think that it takes a little bit of understanding what kinds of decks you're going to be able to beat and what the meta is going to look like before you decide to play a deck running this, because it takes a lot of setup to make this card useful, and you need that setup to survive whatever the meta has going on the most at the time. That said, I think this is a card that will see a rise in popularity, or at least a rise in successful usage, in a month or two after the expansion drops. Almalexia, 7 Magicka 6/6, Exalt 3 plus 6/6, and so that's a 10 Magicka 12/12, which is fantastic. And it says friendly exalted units are immune to damage. That's crazy powerful. They also glow blue on the board, which is pretty sweet. This card is strong enough. I think that as a 10 Magicka 12/12 that's immune to damage, this card is probably powerful enough to run completely on its own. And of course, the ability to drop this down when you have several exalted units already on the board and then just murder your opponent's board is pretty great. It's a very strong card. It'll see play. It's crazy because unlike Vivek or even Sothasil, I don't think Almalexia necessarily goes in the Tribunal Temple deck we're all thinking of building, which is a control deck with a lot of classic control elements. I think this card's definitely a player in an exalted deck in the Tribunal Temple colors, but it's going to be, I think, slower to be adopted into the game. That deck is than the direction we're all kind of planning on taking that color combination at first. So keep that in mind. If you open one, I think you should just drop it in a lot of decks. Play this in Scout deck. Imagine hitting this after doing a little bit of ramping, hitting this on turn 7 or 8, Exalted. You can just kill your opponent. Lich's Ascension, 7 Magicka, ongoing. Your cards cost 0. You may only play 1 card per turn. I love this card. Is it good? No, I don't think so. It is what it is. I'm going to try playing it because I think it's funny. If you ramp twice, you can drop this on turn 5, right? Tree Minder, turn 5. Lich's Ascension, Iron Atronach, Iron Atronach, Iron Atronach. I mean, that seems pretty good. I'm going to try to do it. Don't craft these. But if you open them, play them. That's my purple addendum.